Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. So today we continue to discuss about the life of Buddha. So last time we discussed about how the Buddha was invited to visit his kingdom fathers, as well as teaching uh, to all the royal families members at the courts. So again, we learned the story that when the Buddha went back to his palace, and because no one knew how to make offerings, the food to the Buddha and his uh, monastic disciple. So that's why the Buddha went door by door to beg for food. And knowing that, the king Suddhodana rushed out and asked the Buddha, why did he do that? He supposed to follow the royal traditions because he was a crown prince. Uh, so he's not supposed to beg for food like the beggars. So the Buddha replies as, actually, this is my traditions of all the Buddha in the past, in the present, in the future, to go out to beg for food, at the same time to create the ability to teach other people. And at that time, the Buddha recall a story in the past that in one lifetime, he was a child named Dhammapala. Um, the queen played with that boys for a day, and so she forgot to greet um, the kings. So when the king passed by, she just played with that son without paying attention to the king. So the king is so angry, so he ordered to punish her. But instead of uh, hurting her, she punished her son by ordering the soldier to cut off the son's hands. And at that time, uh, the mothers was so angry and suffer because the king ordered to cut off her own son. But at that moment, the prince uh, smiled and brought the calmness to his mothers. And at that time, the king was so angry that he ordered one more times the soldier to cut off his son's feet so that the queen could be suffer because of her son's suffering. So at that time, the son still keep smiling, and again, uh, the king ordered the soldier to cut off the prince's head. So at that time, the queen became terrified, and she begged for sparing her son's life. So when the king was about to yield, so that prince spoke up uh, and said that, mothers, this is your salvation that I give my head when I'm dead. Let my body be placed on a pipe exposed to the view. So let my body be food for the birds of the air. Uh, and at that time, that son made a vow and says, when I became the Buddha, I would set free for all who are born to die in this world, and now at last I have attained wisdom to become Buddha, and I know the path to lead to liberation. So do not disturb me. So you need to be awakened, follow the holy path, the virtual path. So at that time, the king Suddhodana, he was so admired of his son. So at that time, he fell down and bowed to the Buddha's feet. So again, the Buddha told this past story so that he could let the king know his strong, firm determination to help other people to be liberated, regardless of what happening to his life. Especially in this past story, he would not been afraid of anything. Even his father's king order to cut off his hands and legs, even the head, but he made the vows to rescue all. So that's the past story that relate how the Buddha relied on his virtue to teach his fathers when his father questioned him about why he went out to beg for food. So when he was at the palace, he taught the dharmas to many royal family members, including princes and princesses. So many of them, they don't follow the Buddha to become Buddhist monk in his monastic communities. But one person that would not come to see him, and that was Yasodhara, the princess. So the princess thought that if I have any virtue, if I deserve to see my husband, if I have not done anything wrong, he would come to see me of this old, and I should show him my respect. So at that time, the Buddha knew Yasodhara, the princess, intention and thought. So he left his seat and went to Yasodhara place together with his two main disciples, Shariputra and Moggallana. And so when, like last time we mentioned about that, he came to her place, she bowed down and complained why she did not do anything wrong, but the prince Siddhartha, that's Buddha now, left her. So the Buddha mentioned that I left you because I want to find the truth, to help not only you, but also my son, my family members, and all the sentient beings. And so at that time, Yasodhara mentioned that whenever she heard the news that the princess, means the Buddha's practice self-torture, she followed through. When she heard that he ate one meal a day, she practiced that too. When she heard that he slept under the ground, so she gave up sleeping on the bed too. And so the Buddha replied, yes, I was aware of your great virtue. You have not failed me, and the praise that you are so exceptional, that you have the courage to remain faithful and to follow my footsteps. So by saying that, the Buddha told her the past story, that she have that type of attitude, the faithful attitude toward her husband. So he recalled the past story that he was once a Kanara, that's mean a half human and half bird deity. He lived with his wife on the Silver Mountain in the Himalaya range. So one day, both of them came down from home to play in the stream, covering them in the flowers, singing, dancing, and swim, and so forth. So a king who was happened to come to that area for hunting. So somehow he heard the sweet voices, and eventually he sneaked out to watch them sadly. And somehow he immediately fell in love with the Bodhisattva wives and shot the Bodhisattva with a poisonous arrow, so he could have her for himself. So at that time, Bodhisattva fell unconscious with the blood flowing out of his body, and his wife assumed that he was dead, so cried out in agony. So at that time, the king stepped out of the bushes and approached to the Bodhisattva wives, angry and condemned him. But the king comforted the Bodhisattva wife that don't worry, I will take care of you. I will make you as my queen. So at that moment, Bodhisattva wives, she answered loudly as a lion grown that she rather kill herself than to go with him. So at that time, the king get lost and walk away with no feeling of shame and regret. So at that time, the wives embraced the Bodhisattva body, and she noticed that he was still warm. So she cried out and begged for help before it's too late. So because of her sincerity to save her husband's life, so it caused the throne of the king of gods, Indra, to become shaken. And at that time, with his divine eyes, he saw the sincerity of this lady. And so he rushed down from heaven in the form of Brahmins, and he brought with him his blessed water to sprinkle on Bodhisattva body. And at that moment, the poison was instantly neutralized and the wound disappeared. And the Bodhisattva stood up completely healed. So his wife fell at the Indra feet in praise, and Indra, that's the king of celestial gods, told them they're not supposed to come down to the mountain, to the realms of human. So from that time on, they follow that Indra advice. So the Buddha complete the story, and he said that, well, I was that Bodhisattva in the past, the one that was shot by the king, and Yasodhara was his wife, and she remained faithful with me in the past. and because of her sincerity, she prayed for that Indra to rescue me. So that's why she was my wife in this lifetime. I recognize her virtue. So at that time, he praised Yasodhara, and later on, when the Buddha still stay at the palace, the princess Yasodhara told her son Rahula. At that time, he was only 6 or 7 years old. So she told Rahula that you're supposed to go out and ask your fathers, the Buddha, the treasury, and at that time, Rahula, he was so young that he listened to his mothers and went to see the Buddha. So when he went to see the Buddha, he asked the Buddha, "Father, give me the treasures." And so the Buddha smiled and he said, "Well, the material treasures would bring the suffering for you, but I have the Dharma treasures, just follow me." So at that time, the Buddha asked Venerable Shariputra to take care of Rahula and to allow him to be the first novice in the Buddhist monastic communities. And so at that time, the King Suddhodana, he was so depressed that somehow at first he expected Prince Siddhartha, Desmond Buddha, to become the next king. But Prince Siddhartha left the palace to become the Buddha. And now he went back to teach him and the royal family members. So, and he took Rahula with him. So there's no more heir to take over the kingdom later on. So that's why King Suddhodana, he went to see the Buddha and made a complaint. And he asked the Buddha to make a promise that in the future, if anyone want to become Buddhist monks, they should ask their parents permission. And so the Buddha consent with that request. And later on, there's many prince went to the monastery to become monks under the Buddha teaching. So that's the first time ever he came back to his father kingdom to give the teaching. And so later on he went back to the bamboo grove monastery again in the Jaram country city. And we know that because of the Buddha virtue and wisdom, so many people follow him. Among them were many followers of different traditions. And that's why the leaders of all traditions, they became jealous and they start to slander the Buddhas and his monastic communities. They say that the monk Gautama spell the mass that many people lost their son, their fathers, and their husband. They don't have anyone to take care of the family wealth at all. And so that's why whenever they saw a Buddhist monk, they would complain that types of problems. That's why when ever the monks went out to have the eyebrows and beg for food, they heard this kind of complaint. So when they went back, they report to the Buddha this kind of complaint and slandering. And so the Buddha calmed them mind down and say that don't worry about that, and don't worry about those slandering. Within 7 days, this kind of slandering will be calmed down. So the Buddha said that the holy men appear on the world to teach the utmost principle to human who ever want to slander the teaching of the holy men. So certainly after 7 days, those type of slandering would not exist anymore. Many leaders of different religious traditions left that city to go to different country to get the support from other kings. Also during that time, the people in Vesali era, they have the drought, and they could not cultivate the rice anymore because of the pandemics that caused thousands of people dying, and mostly they were the poor people. So that's why people just put those corpses in the cloth and drop down into the river or put in the forest. So somehow we could imagine now the COVID-19 is happening seriously in India. Thousands and hundreds of thousands of people got that type of COVID-19 virus, and thousands of them die every day. So that's what happened in the past during the Buddha times. So there were many people pass away due to this kind of pandemics, regardless who they were, whether they young, old, poor, rich, and so forth. So even there's some excellent doctors in that kind of areas, they gave up too. So the Brahmin priests, they set up the altars to pray for overcoming this type of pandemics, but there's no result. So finally, the people thought about going to see the Buddha to get help, and even some prince from Lichavi clans went to see the King Bimbisara to ask permission to see the Buddha, so that they could invite Buddha to visit Vesali, so that the Buddha would bless them to eradicate that pandemic due to his virtue. and wisdom. So eventually, when they came to see the Buddha and made that request, the Buddha accepted their invitation. So when the Buddha, when they brought to that area, uh, the kings, prince, and all people greet the Buddhas and his Sangha, that means religious communities, happily. So when he was there, suddenly there was some kind of thunderstorm, and there was raining heavily, and that was the first ever rain they had uh, um, after several months of being drought. So the people in that country, they were so happy to praise to Buddha, as well as singing under the rain. Due to the rain, it brought the coolness and cleanliness to that area. So that type of raining water purify all the virus or the epidemics. They read the Buddha and his followers of monks to the capitals of Vesali. So they set up many small tents so that the Buddha and his monks could stay there. And the next day, the Buddha gathered them and gave the teaching about the triple jewels. That's what he talked about, the jewel of the Buddha, jewel of the Dharma, and jewel of the Sangha, so that they could rely upon. And so many of them took the Jewish refuges with the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, as well as keeping the 5 basic precepts: no killing, no stealing, no such misconduct, no lying, and no taking intoxicant. And due to their faith with the Buddha, eventually they would stay away from all kind of nature disaster. And after that, the Buddha went around the city, especially where they had the epidemics. He taught them how to live moderately, how to live in sanity, how to prevent the disease and epidemics by living with the virtue and abiding the 5 basic precepts. And eventually, within 2 weeks, the epidemics disease were reduced tremendously. And from that time on, many of them became Buddha disciple, including the prince, the common people. So that is the story how he taught the Buddha, and according to the record, it says that thousands of them attend the first hardship. Why the Buddha was staying at the bamboo grove monastery, there was a story related to a prostitute, or what we call in the past the courtesan. Her name is Pali. So this lady, she was a beautiful lady, and she was born under the mango trees, and that's why she got that name. And she was so beautiful that many kings waged the war with each other to get her, and among them King Bimbisara, he raised the war to kill the neighbor kings to get her, and somehow even he built a palace for her at her gardens. And when his son killed, imprisoned King Bimbisara, he also fell in love with this lady, the Barapali. So later on, she heard the news that the Buddha was teaching in the area, so she went to see the Buddha teaching, went there to listen to Buddha teaching, and she invited the Buddha came to visit her quarters to accept the offerings. Let me show you a short video clips about this positive, in the past we call courtesan, how she has the faith in Buddha and follow his teaching. Let me share with you. And this here long script, but let me skip it.
Commanders were preparing for the battle. Bimbisar was spellbound by the performance of Amrapali, fell in love. Amrapali asked, "I have never seen you before. Where do you come from?" Bimbisar replied, without disclosing his identity, "I am a stranger. I've heard so much about you that I had to come to see you. Would you mind telling me your name?" requested Amrapali. Bimbisar replied, "I am Bimbisar, the ruler of Magadha." Amrapali was taken by surprise and admired his courage. "Come with me to my kingdom," continued Bimbisar. "I would like to marry you and cease all hostilities against Vaishali." Amrapali, by then, was indeed in love with Bimbisar, but very painfully turned him down because of her pledge to the nobles of Vaishali. Bimbisar went back to his kingdom, rejected and disappointed. He asked his soldiers to retreat, and the battle stopped. The nobles came back to Amrapali and informed her that Bimbisar reacted like a coward. Only Amrapali knew what actually happened. She became increasingly depressed, thinking of Bimbisar and his deep-seated love towards her. She gave up all pleasures of life and could no longer dance. The nobles left her alone, not knowing what brought this sudden change. One day, Amrapali saw a young man with happy countenance carrying a beautiful lotus and going towards the outskirts of Vaishali. When Amrapali inquired, the young man replied, "I am heading towards Kotigram, where Lord Buddha has camped for his discourse to the people." Amrapali became thoughtful. She had heard of Buddha as the one who knows cause of all sufferings. She decided to go and visit Buddha, and she joined the crowd. With rapt attention, Amrapali heard Buddha say, "Out of desire comes the grief and fear. Free yourself from desire, and the grief and fear will wither away." Amrapali began to experience a new kind of joy. The words of Buddha soothed her. She went to Kotigram daily and listened to the Lord. She wanted Buddha to visit her house, but she was hesitant to invite him as she was a public dancer. Soon it was time for Buddha to leave Vaishali. Even after Buddha left, Amrapali continued to visit Kotigram every evening. She would circle the place where Buddha sat, praying to the Lord and listening to him in her imagination. Then one day, to her surprise, Buddha returned. She ran up to him and fell at his feet. Then she built up the courage to invite him to her house. Buddha saw the pain she was going through and promised to visit her house. Amrapali rushed home to make preparations. When the nobles heard of Buddha's coming to Amrapali's house, they felt insulted. Why should Buddha visit the house of an ill-reputed public dancer? They exclaimed. He should rather come to the royal palace. The nobles first offered bribe to Amrapali so that she would agree to bring Buddha to the palace instead of her house. Amrapali turned them down. Then they went to Lord Buddha, requesting him to visit the royal palace instead of Amrapali. Buddha firmly replied, "I am sorry, I cannot. I have already agreed to visit Amrapali at her house." Buddha came to the house of Amrapali with his favorite disciples. Amrapali served them with great honor. She was so very happy after a long time. With great reverence, Amrapali asked, "Lord, why do I feel such immense joy as I serve you?" Buddha said, "Amrapali, you have begun to know the joy of giving." Later, Amrapali went to Buddha to offer the garden and the house for the Sangha, the association of seekers of truth which Buddha organized. Buddha accepted her offer. Thus Amrapali renounced her worldly life and got the peace of mind she had been craving for.
Okay, so here is the story about this prostitute. Somehow, now even in the past, people looked out for that type of jobs, not that type of people. But the Buddha still accept her invitation to receive the food at her place, and eventually she offered the Buddha her place so that the Buddha and his disciple could stay there. So again, you see the story that because of her sincerity, she later on became Buddhist nun. But before that, there's some story that relate to this courtesan or prostitute. That somehow there was a monk. He really dedicated in his practice. But somehow when the Buddha brought him together with other monks to her place to receive the offerings, she paid attention on these monks and asked the Buddha permission for him to stay at her place during the rainy season. And of course, at first, many monks they would mm, think that there's no way for Buddha allow a monk to stay at a positive place for the rainy season. But to their surprise, the Buddha allowed that monk to stay there. So um, uh, due to the Buddha permission, that monk stayed there for 3 months during the rainy season. And after that, most of the monk thought that, well, this monk could not function himself anymore as the monk because he would be tempted by this positive. And guess what? After 3 months, he went back to see the Buddha with the full deportment. That means he could keep up with his vows to practice the monkhood life. And instead of being tempted by this positive, he could convert her and transform her into a good person. So that's why at first the Buddha recognized his dedication for spiritual life. And so that's why the Buddha allowed him to stay there to receive the offerings from this positive for 3 months. And he recognized that eventually this monk could overcome the temptation from this positive, and he could provide a teaching for her to become a sincere Buddhist. And of course, there's many stories that relate to this positive. Later on, she asked Buddha permission for her to become Buddhist nun. Of course, after the Buddha established the nun tradition, so the Buddha accepted her into the Sangha as a nun, and eventually, because of her dedication and diligence, that's why she attained arhatship, and she left herself the verses that describe how she became Buddhist nun, attained the arhatship, even she was a positive before. And this is very famous story in the Buddhist tradition, even in India. There's you could imagine more than 2,500 years ago, the position of a positive is considered low. I mean that they were closed class people, and but somehow the Buddha elevate their status and accept them in the Buddhist monastic communities without any kind of discriminations, because the Buddha mentioned that yes, we have physical difference, male and female, young and old, but mentally and spiritually we are equal. So who could put sufficient effort to practice, eventually they would overcome their sufferings, temptations, anger, or all kind of fluctuation. And that's why he accepts this courtesan or pursue into the Sangha, and eventually she attained the arhatship. So since time is up, let me stop here today. And so next time I can share with you more. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. See you then.